Well, hi everyone. Welcome to the New England Racing Show, Manchester, New Hampshire, Channel 23. We're also on YouTube and Facebook, and I'm your host, Bill Sturgis. Well, a couple of weeks ago, we went to Charlotte, North Carolina for the NASCAR banquet, and we visited the Penske Racing shops on our last show, and also Charlotte Speedway. And then we visited, the next day we visited the NASCAR Hall of Fame, which we're going to show you here. As soon as we walked in, they had a bunch of cars on display. And that's the mellow yellow car. And they had a lot of video screens about the movie. And there's the Hardee's car and how they would do in the movie. I believe that's Bobby Hamilton driving the Hardee's car. And the 51. They said it was loaded with camera equipment, but it was still going pretty fast.
In the Days of Thunder movie, trying to raise a little awareness tonight for the cause of post-traumatic stress disorder for our soldiers returning home. Kurt and his crew chief, Nick Harrison, they've been rehearsing their lines from the movie just about all week long.
Where do you want to go?
Yeah, I like to hear it.
To win in Indy, I need a great car. But stock cars are all the same. There's nothing stock about a stock car. Look, I'm not trying to insult you. The stock cars are
And there's Kurt Busch taking part in the, not the movie itself, I don't believe it. They did a
well, they built him a car, and he
fundraiser
just might win Daytona
for
on Friday. Let's
post-traumatic
dial
stress
over.
syndrome for the soldiers.
He's got this thing shaped like, and about to hit everything out here, including the pace car tonight.
4 laps.
2 liter, cold trim by 3 by
4 liters. On board Kurt Busch.
Up in the hammer. No, you're not.
Well, it's time for a pit stop. I don't know if everybody's doing it.
Yeah, I don't know about that either. But if they do
might be a little
do you
busy.
think he's got that perfectly matched set of tires for him?
I think they probably do, but they're probably not going to put them on.
Not, he's going to get 2 of them.
Just gas, probably.
Yeah, Rowdy's been working with us today, and we got a couple other of these guys out here. Just got one rookies. I'm going to beat some back bumpers off here for a little bit. Hopefully they come through and poke a hole in our radiator, but we still got a little ways to go. A few more cautions.
And here's the old Herbie car. They did a movie about that, the Herbie car racing at Daytona. When my kids were little, that was their favorite car. Don't mean to embarrass them. The old Hudson Hornet from the 50s, the beginning of NASCAR. Maybe even the late 40s, I'm not sure. And this was interesting. This is a 62 Chevy driven by Wendell Scott, the pioneer. He was a black driver back in the old days, and he didn't have much money. He got hand-me-down parts. See on the side it says mechanic, me. And the saying is that, from what I read, that when he did his pit stops, he actually had to get out of the car and put the gas in and change tires. And that's unheard of in this day and age, but maybe they should make him do that. That'd be interesting. And that's a stock steering wheel from a 62 Chevy. I know because my parents had a 62 Chevy and just got a bunch of tape on it. You can see the seat, no wraparound or anything back then, but it was a high seat to keep your head from snapping back. That's the stock gas cap. It sticks out a little bit. And you can see it's got all the original bumpers and trim and everything. One of Jeff Gordon's cars. That must be one of the original NASCAR cars. Red Byron, I remember his name. I think this is from the 40s. It's when they ran the beach at Daytona. See some old movies of these things flipping over. Pretty interesting. Tim Flock's car. That must be from the early 50s. I don't know if it's an Oldsmobile or a Buick. Imagine changing the tires on that with those fender skirts. It's almost the equivalent of a street stock running at one of the local tracks today. And they had different screens. Here's one from the 50s. The fabulous Hudson Hornets. They used to clean house back then. The Chevy still had the hood ornament on it. I think that's the beach at Daytona. And they ran a lot of dirt tracks back then, too. Just like this year, they went back to a dirt track with the Truck Series. Although the track was packed down pretty good, it was almost like asphalt, but that was a nice race. And this, I believe, is the first Daytona 500. That's Lee Petty's car. He won the race, and that's probably the car he won in. Look at that, the windows still rolled up. Stock wheels. I think that's an Oldsmobile or a Pontiac, and dual exhaust coming out in the middle of the, above the bumper. That's weird. But you couldn't get too close to these cars. You couldn't really touch them. I think this is a Plymouth, like a 61 or 62. And they used to have the horsepower number on the hood. Oh, a Ford, okay. Doesn't look like. Yeah, a Galaxy, 63 Galaxy. This is one of my favorites. One of Richard Petty's cars from like 64, 65. And they had the 426 Hemi. back in, I believe, 73, 74, they got rid of the big blocks and decided to go to the small blocks. I guess the big blocks were putting out too much horsepower. And you look at the inside of this, it's kind of primitive. Not much of a seat there, not even a backing for his head. You look, it still has a lot of the silver trim around the windows. And stock body, you can tell the doors, the opening there. They must just weld the doors shut. Still have the door handle on it. Chrome door handle. Pretty much a stock gas tank. Probably the stock back window with a couple of braces on it. And then we get to the Superbirds from 1970, 71. And believe it or not, this thing qualified at Daytona at 200 miles an hour. I think Bobby Isaac drove this one. And it was a while, they slowed them down. It was a while before anyone went that fast after that. But the car was, it's kind of primitive and, 43 years old. And it was going 200 miles an hour, which is pretty much what they're doing now. Took some guts to drive those things. You can see that's pretty much a stock body too. That had the 426 Hemi. Here we are with the, I believe this is a Torino, 429. That was Ford's answer to the Hemis, David Pearson's car. Now they took the door handles off finally. But that engine was really a powerful engine. And they had to build, I believe, 500 of them and make them available to the public in order to be able to race them in NASCAR. So you could get the 429 Mustang, the Boss 429, or the full-size Ford. Say that engine never reached its potential because to squeeze it into the Mustang, they had to put really restrictive headers, exhaust manifolds on it. And that was choking the engine. You can see they're starting to get with the aerodynamics then, with the sloped back window. Oh, it's a Mercury Montego. And I believe this is Cale Yardborough's car from the late 70s. Pretty much the same type of car in 79 when he got in the accident with Donnie Allison on the last lap of the Daytona 500. Those were big cars. That's when they used to do the slingshot. And they have a video of the 70s. There's a car we were just looking at. I don't know what kind of seat belts he had on there. I don't see anything going over his shoulder. Maybe just a lap belt. And then we get to the early 80s. I believe this is when they downsized the cars. 81, I believe, 82. They had to use the intermediate models instead of the big ones. And I remember when they came out with them, the aerodynamics were kind of not predictable, and some of the cars would just get airborne at 190 miles an hour. Now we start to have some shoulder braces here. But look at how far things have come. It's amazing. The cars look nice on the outside, but you look on the inside of them and they just don't have the safety features. Darrell Waltrip's car. I remember when Darrell came in I think it was late 70s, early 80s, he ruffled a lot of feathers, to say the least. This is a Busch car. At some point they changed the Busch series to, they called it the Grand National, and the other one's the Cup. And here's my favorite right here, Richie Evans modified, the Cavalier from the early 80s. One of the first designs not to use the Pinto or Gremlin body. And Richie was a legend. We actually saw him race at Monadnock Speedway, and we saw him race at Star Speedway in '78, along with Jeff Bodine and Ronnie Bouchard. Stood in the pits and watched them work on their cars. Back in '78, they had the big blocks. And you stand there and your whole body would just shake watching these cars get revved up. Just a beautiful car. Yeah, we never got to know Richie, but he's quite a guy from what I heard. I know he was quite a driver. There's Bill Elliott's car from, I believe, 82, 83. Maybe a little later. He won the $1 million bonus. They called him $1 million Bill for doing that. And that was his heyday right there. I know now he's at the end of his career, but my kids asked me how good he was, and I said he was real good. And that was a family operation, too, from Georgia. Dawsonville, I believe. They have all the cars lined up on the look-alike track here, starting with the early ones and working their way up. So then we went up to, okay, this is the 80s, the Darrell Waltrip car. Dale Earnhardt in the Wrangler car in the early 80s. And him and Darrell Waltrip had a pretty good rivalry going. We actually went to the Richmond race back in '85 or '86 when Darrell and Dale Earnhardt went at it, and both of them spun each other out on the last lap, and Jeff Bodine got caught up in it, and Petty won the race, Petty's son. There's one of my heroes, Timmy Richmond. He was just awesome. Harry Hyde is crew chief.
Trying to rein in the talented young driver. Randy Quaid took a turn as team owner, a park model
Hendricks.
himself. The namesake of Hendricks car dealership.
When Hendricks was just starting, he just had some awesome drivers. Tim Richmond, Jeff Bodine.
The next task was to capture racing as it had never been seen before. To provide a context that brings a fictional story to the real heart of racing. Filming that involved the most cameras used at one time, including camera cars competing.
Filming the movie there. I guess that's still the Days of Thunder movie. Yeah, that's what we were watching before, Bobby Hamilton, Darrell Waltrip.
Days of Thunder became one of the highest-grossing films of 1990. NASCAR grew into a national phenomenon that demonstrates that big stars plus big drama make for big box office.
Bobby Allison's car from, I believe, '88. Maybe a little later. Buick Regal from '86. And there's one of the trucks. Ron Hornaday's Silverado from '96. Then we get up into the '90s when a young kid named Jeff Gordon came on the scene, along with Davey Allison, who won the first New Hampshire Speedway race back in '93. Shortly thereafter, he died in the helicopter crash, but he was a rising star. Yeah, the saying is they were watching Jeff Gordon. I think he was running a sprint car or a midget, and the car was super loose. And one of the car owners was saying, I can't believe that anyone can drive a car this loose. And, that's partly how he got the ride, just showing off some wicked talent. It makes you feel old now when you see Jeff Gordon running, and people, my kids are telling me, oh, he's just an old guy hanging on. Seems like he just started.
A race car just winked at you. I swear, the car just winked at me. Are you
and part of the Herbie movie again.
Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson were just two of the many NASCAR drivers who appeared in the film, including a climactic cameo by Dale Jarrett. Despite being on the losing end of the Herbie slingshot
Of course, that's a movie
match,
for kids because
Jarrett ran
anyone
a special
knows
teams
that
team.
that could never happen.
And that's what it's about, good family fun. And it's not a lot of fun to get past out here on Sundays, but when you're a part of a movie like this, then you can look at it and really have a good time.
They are filming scenes for Herbie the Love Bug remake, if you will. Herbie is part of the big stars here. A Volkswagen actually did run in a NASCAR Cup race in the mid-50s. That is one hot rod. It'll probably run as fast as some of these cars out there.
One of the early iconic images.
There was quite a bit there in the Hall of Fame, and this is a two-part show. We're part one today and part two next week. They had a lot of different exhibits there, a lot more than just showing race cars, and that's what we'll get into in the next part. This is a different exhibit we got to, the Hall of Honor. I guess you get voted into that. It's an old Ford from the 60s. 63, I believe, the round taillights. Buck Baker's car.
Leonard thinks things through and sees things in his head that most people could never imagine or never dream.
And Rusty Wallace's car. I believe he won a championship in that car. And it's just about finishes part one. So we're going to do part two next week, which was a lot of different exhibits, and it was real interesting. I tell you, I could have stayed there for like 3 or 4 hours, but we taped an hour, and that was on Saturday, and we had to leave Saturday around 5 o'clock to take our flight back, which was pretty interesting because it started to pour down there. It was 50 degrees, and everyone's saying how cold it was, but we came home to this snowstorm. Anyway, well, thanks for joining us, and we'll have part two of the Hall of Fame next week.